Welcome back, fellow listener. Welcome back to my channel, the Stoned Bard channel. Then, only one day from the last live, I really know that, but today is Sunday. Sunday is a good day. It's pretty cold, and we can go out because we are in red zone and there is the virus outside. So let's continue with our book. We are almost at the end of Artifact of Evil. I forgot my water. Fuck. Anyway, we are almost at the end of Artifact of Evil, the second book of the Guard the Rogue series, and the second book of the Greyhawk Adventure series, written by none other than Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons. And the book itself is set in Greyhawk, the first setting ever created of Dungeons and Dragons. Then, anyway, last time we read the three chapters, we see our heroes guard Galor shirt fighting with their army of humanoids at the service of Obmi and Keak, discover that Obmi and Keak escape from the fight for deliver the second key to their master, the evil use, and then Guard follow them, transformed into a leopard, into a panther, a black panther, sorry, and try a perilous trick, a dangerous trick, because it deceived Obmi and Keak believing that he is a servant of Grast. Then let's see how the story um, follow from this point, because we are pretty short distance from the end of the book itself. But first I need to take my water, so let me pause for a second. Sorry, I return in a second. I promise. I promise. But okay, now that I have my water, uh, physical proof of that. Yeah. We can start with our chapter 28. I have a bit of age today. So anyway, I try. The quiet of the night was shattered by the sound of an advancing army. That it moved heedless of any opposition bespoke its size and the power of those who commanded the host. It went through the heart of Wesley forest southward. It was a host of youths, a horde of bandits, the vilest of mercenary humans, and every sort of humanoid imaginable. Loathsome trolls shambled with the army, and great ogres swamped in its ranks. The force marched on heedless of any danger, and at its head rode the archmage called Ormuz, and the high priest of Uz, known as Patch. They went forth to bring wrath and ruin to all who opposed them, and to bring a dwarf named Obmi to stand before their master. God heard the wailing sound of their approach before any of the others did. He knew what was occurring, but he was powerless to do anything about it. Keak himself was alertly on watch, and the young thief knew that he would never be able to slay the elf without the magic user alerting the others. Gord would have no chance against Obmi and the elf, and the two humans who served them. To attempt anything would be to throw his life away, so Gord did what he thought best. Lord Keak, I hear the sounds of a vast company approaching, he called softly, sitting erect as he did so. Shall I alert the others to arm themselves and escape southward? Stand fast! Keak ordered, and he cocked his large pointed ear toward the north, straining visibly to hear the faint sounds. After a time he turned and gazed at the man who had so recently joined the service of the dwarf. You have keen ears too, do you? I'd say you are altogether too keen and too ready to turn southward toward the enemy. The skinny elf cackled at what he had just said, then went near to where Obmi slept under a thick quilt. Lord, I hear the sounds of an approaching force, he said softly. What's that? What force? From where does it come? Witless elf, tell me quickly. I hear nothing at all. It is, I believe, a reception party for your great person, lord, for it approaches boldly down the road from the north, from our lord's own lands, from youth. Shit, the slumbering lives! Obmi cursed under his breath as he sprang from his resting place. Don't just stand there stupidly, you daddering fool. Help me prepare myself for this group that comes. Everything must be just so, or I'll never forgive you. Such fussiness nearly made Gord snicker. Were this not the conjunction of the most vile and malicious creatures imaginable, the circumstances of the meeting would indeed be ludicrously funny. A journey of hundreds of leagues with the fate of the entire earth and more at stake, and the instrument of it all worries about minor appearance in the middle of a howling wilderness. Gord shook his head in wonder at the whimsical fate that allowed all of this to transpire, for he too was but a pawn in a game whose scope he could not comprehend. What meaning? He wondered, and what true understanding would I have where I have of the stature of youth, grass, or any of the even greater figures in this struggle? Unable and unwilling to consider the whole implication of this, Gord did what he could. With your permission, Lord Obmi, he said, I will ride ahead and bring the approaching host of youths to you, announcing you to those who come to receive you properly. The dwarf talked about this proposal for only a moment. Yes, that is mate. You have my permission to go forth as herald. In a minute Gord had his horse saddled, and swung up onto its back without a glance back at the frantic activity of Obmi and Keak. As he rode, the young thief wondered what he should do. It would be simple enough to just melt into the forest and be safe. This was not what he wished to. If there was any chance for him to foil the plans of youth, Gord would take the risk and pay the ultimate price if need be. Was there such a chance? He had to try. Shoulders sword, back straight, Gord rode on up the path to play the role of herald of Lord Obmi, for the oncoming horde of despicable creatures commanded by who knew what sort of disgusting servants of the demon bastard youths. The sounds of the marching army were now clearly audible to the deafest ear. Gord halted his horse and called as loudly as he could, his tone filled with confidence that he did not fail. Hail the advance! The herald of Lord Obmi demands immediate audience with the commander of this force. The words were hardly out of his mouth before he was surrounded by a pack of humanoid outrunners. This scum conveyed him rapidly northward past the advance guard of the horde. Somewhere along the route, the lowly swarts and gnolls were replaced by trolls and human servants who cried out, Make way for the herald of Lord Obmi! And the throng of mongrels and hateful humanoids parted, as if by magic for Gord to ride through unmolested. Your name, herald? An authoritarian voice demanded in bass tone. Stot, herald of the dreaded dwarf Lord Obmi, the faithful servant of the Lord of ancient evil youths. Gord replied in his best formal manner. Hail, herald of the dwarf Obmi, you are come to the host of youth. I am its general, Ormuz, and you may report all to me. Where is Obmi, and does he carry the object which our master desires? I am your servant to command, General Ormuz of the host of youth. Gord intoned formally in reply, trusting that no absolute ritual was prescribed for such a meeting. The Lord Obmi is but a short way south of here, awaiting the meeting with you. He is carrying the object, I believe. Believe? You are Obmi's own herald, and you do not know with certainty if the object of all this is born with your lord? My post is new, Lord General Ormuz, and my Lord Obmi is most careful. Details are better left to such ones as you and he. This is well said, Herald Stolt. I think I concur with Obmi's selection of you for the role, even though it be but a recent appointment. After this whole affair is concluded, come to me and we will discuss possibilities of service. So saying, the hooded and cloaked Ormuz dismissed Gord and rode past. Ignored, Gord simply turned his horse and rode with the procession of underlings that followed the leader of the host. He was surprised when the procession he was surprised when the procession he was now part of turning to the west, veering away from Obmi's camp a mile or two to the southeast. A dark woman in rusty red clerical robes riding beside him spoke to Gord. No wonder Lord Ormuz was so pleased with your unexpected arrival, she said. We are near the gathering place, and now Obmi can report to us, while Lord Ormuz sits in proper state. Gord simply murmured a non-committal reply and rode on. Perhaps a few hundred advance guards and scouts preceded the head of the horde. They not only made certain that no enemy was lurking nearby, but cleared the way and now fired great torches to light the path. Flankers likewise chopped at brush and kept the column in some semblance of order. The wall of the fort must stretch for miles northward. The forest pathway was narrow. 3 horsemen or possibly 4 could ride abreast along its narrowest parts. Gord could not calculate how long the tail of this army must be, but it made his head reel to think of it. Their way had been overgrown with scrub, but the advance had cleared it easily enough. The trail was wider here, and it was growing broader all the while. They had entered the neck of a funnel, and were now moving toward its mouth, he analogized. The flaring torches illuminated a large area of grassland ahead. Lady Cleric, Gord said, leaning close to the dark woman. I must take my leave now, for Lord Obmi must be informed of where he is expected to meet Lord Ormuz. Is there some postword I must use to ride back to the east and south? Having overheard the words of Lord Ormuz regarding this fellow's future with the Archmage, the woman was eager to make him her friend. Sir Harold, I am the Princess Layla. You may call upon me any time, she said, and she shot Gord a seductive smile that conveyed the meaning she had more in mind than information or social pleasantries. The utterance of Lord Ormuz's name is sufficient to pass through the lines, but first you should have this as well, Layla said as she took a large pin from her cloak and handed it to Gord. He saw it was a bronze device enameled in the colors of hues, black, white, and red. A circle confined a triangle which in turn bore a reversed pentagram. The circle was a black snake biting its own tail. Its field was white, as was the pentagram inside the red field of the triangle. My thanks, priestess. You may likewise call upon Harold Stott, Gord said, and he sent her a glance that promised much. Then he turned his steed and began to work his way back against the press of the throng. Gord said nothing until he neared the narrow entry to the area Layla had identified as the gathering place. He supposed it was a rallying point for assembly of forces to raid and make war. They must be nearer to the realm of use than he had thought. The neck was crowded with troops marching into the area. The unit entering happened to be a well-disciplined company of swords, little humanoids with big heads and bluish skin. These were evidently the baggage train escorts, for Gord could see carts and pack animals along the trail behind them. Reining his horse to the right as far as possible, he began to ride by the little humanoids. Shouting, "Make way for the herald of Lord Obmi!" repeatedly at the top of his voice. The swards were unwilling to allow him to pass, but the warning the badge showed in his left hand and the size of his horse intimidated the evil-looking creatures sufficiently for them to give a grudging path along the left shoulder of their column. Clucking his mount to a trot, Gord managed to clear the bottleneck just before the mass of baggage clogged it fast. It would take nearly an hour before it was passed and the next unit of troops entered. At this rate, it would be noon before the whole force was settled in the open space. This offered hope. Several ogres blocked the pathway about a bowshot's distance from the turning he had just negotiated. "Make way for the herald of Lord Obmi, passing by authority of Lord Ormuz," Gord bellowed in his best voice. All but one of the 8-foot-tall humanoids got out of the path, but the largest hulked in the center of the way unmoving. "Where you going?" the creatures demanded. "On official duty by leave of Lord Ormuz," Gord replied, with as much disdain in his tone as he could, and he thrust out the badge given him by Layla. "Out of my way!" Scratching its loose-infested mop of lank, greasy hair, the nearest giant shuffled aside reluctantly, and Gord rode quickly past him, going southward to bring the news to the dwarf of what was transpiring. Obmi flew into a terrible rage at Gord's report. The dwarf was being upstaged and denigrated by the archmage, and Obmi's fury extended to the one who informed him of this fact. Keak was delighted at the tirade, but for once his demented brain worked to Gord's favor. Lord, you are justly wroth, the elf managed to tell Obmi as the dwarf was drawing breath for a fresh string of oaths. But Stott is the one who has brought you information which will allow us to slap Ormuz with his own gauntlet. What you mean, Keak? The livid dwarf replied, withholding his ire as Keak explained his Stott. Ormuz thinks to prepare a spectacle where he will be richly dressed and enthroned amid this host, while we come to him like beggars, hats in hand, to report your success. He will then demand custody of the item you have so cleverly gained and brought to your very doorstep. He will claim that it will be safer in his care, for Stott says that there are thousands in the army he commands. I know all that, Obmi spat, and that is why my bile flows so strongly. Fool, is there meaning in your babble, or are you flapping those skinny elvish lips to hear them clap together? Keak managed a small giggle at that, but his eyes were hard. He looked down, composed himself, and said, My lord, I have a point indeed. Ormuz in his overweening pride and pomp has neglected to send any message to you. Stott came on his own to tell you of what was happening, although he was not quick-witted enough to see the potential to disgrace your enemy and turn the tables on him. Obmi's face became calmer, and the light of keen interest sprang into his small, steel-colored eyes. Well, Keak, you have the plan out with it. In your Ormuz and his mass of troops entirely, lord. If we ride now, we can be past before daylight comes. Leave the fool sitting with his entourage while you carry the prize into the Raha alone. Yes, said Obmi, understanding instantly. The puffed-up fool will think to leave me cooling my heels until he is prepared. Ormuz thinks to sit in state to receive me, as liege does vassal. If I came before his call, he will simply keep me in some corner, until he decided the time was right for his show of power. He thinks to win either way, and I, Obmi the Wrath, will demonstrate otherwise. We live now. Get on your horses, you slugs. Your cleverness is truly astounding, lord, Keak remarked dryly. Isn't it? The dwarf concurred without questioning the statement. Stott, you will precede us to clear a path. When we are at the entry to the gathering place, you will go there and say no word of me. None! Your duty will then be concluded, and you will be able to count on my favor thereafter should you remain silent. As you wish, Lord Obmi, Gord replied with a sinking heart. Just as they came opposite to the mass of humanoids logging into the way that opened onto the vale where Lord Ormuz was preparing his reception to humiliate Obmi, there was a great commotion. Drones thundered in the gathering place, and horns brayed and bellowed brazen tones. There were shouts and cries of command, and the disorderly troops of gnolls slashing their way westward suddenly swung into a fast trot amid snarls and barking calls. The alarm, sorry. The alarm is raised, Obmi said with a tone of wonderment, and all seemed concerned with something within the place. What think you, Keak? That we shall ride like thunder to the north, the elf cackled. Demons be praised, our luck is getting better and better. Then let us go, shouted the dwarf. Stott, be off with you. Wait, you can leave now, Gord commanded the dwarf, trying to think of some reason to delay the departure of the two who bore the precious second key. Obmi's face was a mask of anger, but Keak interposed himself. I will take care of this one, lord, he said with a menacing look that bespoke tones of insane malice, and as he uttered a terrible cackling, the elf reached inside his robes and began to make jerking passes with his hands. Gord could think of nothing to do but attack. He had his sword unsheathed in a flash, while the dagger seemed to spring into his gloved left hand. Guiding his mount with knee pressure, the desperate young adventurer closed to strike at the vile dwarf, but the elven spellcaster was in the way. Gord's blow struck Keak but lightly, for the horse he rode was prancing nervously and carried him away from the blade, even as it darted forth. There was a slim line that oozed blood across the elf's narrow forehead. Bastardling man! Keak screamed at Gord in a voice mixed with pain and fury. That he had dared to attack him was bad enough, but worse still was the effect of the slight cut. The elfin mage had begun a casting, and the sudden pain of the wound on his forehead had spoiled the humor. Now, you feeble fart, I shall give you no mercy. Gord ducked low in his saddle, urged his horse ahead, and sent an attack directly at Keak. Obmi was cursing, and his hammer seemed to roar as it passed over Gord's head, ruffling his dark hair. Had Gord not suddenly crushed, the weapon would have struck him full on. His slashing blow struck the elf solidly this time, and the spellbinder gasped in real pain at death. Gord heard the loud whirling of the hammer as it flew back to its wielder's hand. He suddenly realized that dark figures raced past the little drama without bothering to notice what was happening. The call to battle was sounding, and there was no time to spare for a minor roadside dispute. A string of glowing darts leaped from Keak's outstretched hand, and their impact brought terrible pain to Gord's chest. The rush of agony did not prevent his own attack, however, and the razor-like edge of his short sword nearly severed the elf's rigid arm. Keak shrieked in pain at his wound, and Gord managed to get close and deliver a double attack with dagger and sword before the mage could cast another spell upon him. Both blades sank home, and the elf reeled in his saddle. Obmi was cursing nearby, but the dwarf was unable to cast his enchanted hammer into the confused melee for fear of hitting Keak. Flames gushed from Keak's fingertips, searing both Gord and his horse with their licking tongues. The animal screamed and reared, throwing the young thief from its back. Gord tried desperately to hold on, but all he managed to do was pull the spear from its lashings as he fell. This slowed his stumble and allowed him to land on his feet holding the spear. Sword and dagger were somewhere on the ground. The burned horse was gone into the woods, crashing and blundering its way from the torment it had just suffered. Obmi's whirling hammer struck Gord on the shoulder and sent him lurching toward Keak, who was reading a fresh spell. Without considering it, Gord stabbed with the long-bladed weapon, managing to put the point well into the elf's thigh. Then he withdrew the spear quickly, threw it fleet at the dwarf, and bent to retrieve his sword and poniard from where they had fallen. For the cat's vision he now had enabled him to see both weapons clearly. The spear flew through, striking Obmi in the chest, as he was extending his arm to receive the returning hammer. The metal of his armor saved him, for the steel of the spear's head barely pierced his flesh. The blow caused him to drop the hammer toe, and the dwarf was forced to clamber down from his saddle to recover his prized weapon. As an afterthought, Obmi flung the spear toward his adversary, but it went harmlessly past Gord and struck a tree ball. To prevent the elven spellcaster from his magical work, Gord slapped the flat of his sword blade across the elf's horse with all the force he could. The animal leaped and bucked, kicking wildly. Then the blow fell, and Keak pitched from its back, just as Gord had been dismounted but a moment previously. By this time the dwarf had managed to pick up his hammer and climb back atop his horse. Up his hammer and Gord had to dive to avoid taking another blow from the flying weapon. Gord continued the leap as a series of rolls flipped to his feet and struck a blow at the elf as he regained his feet. The blade cut through the robe Keak wore and seared the flesh of his skinny body as it passed, but it was no mortal wound. Gord mentally thanked his patron deities for Obmi's decision to leave his other two guards behind as unnecessary encumbrance to his plan. Had those two been here now, the young thief knew he would have been dead. As it was, things were looking very desperate. Keak was babbling rapid, unintelligible syllables now, while Obmi kept Gord busy ducking his hurled hammer. Gord decided to try to finish Keak and then see what the dwarf could do one-on-one. He sprang close and thrust both blades full into the thin body of the elf, just as Keak was losing his fell humor at his adversary. Keak managed a startled squawk, then lunged limply, suspended from the blades that passed through heart and liver. Gord made no sound at all, for he and his weapons had been turned to grey stone. "So much for both of you, then," the dwarf hissed, looking upon the strange tableau with some surprise. "Who would have thought a man such as that one could have done for a mage of your power, Keak?" he mused. "Have you no cackle for me, elf?" "No, I suppose not. For your first spirit must be screaming its way to the abyss, even as your dead ears fail to hear my words. But you haven't failed me, Keak. You, and Stout, too, have served me well. My thanks, Stout, for ridding me of this one who always schemed to usurp me. Keak, you have rid me of one who was bent on my downfall, of that I am sure. Now I leave you, and may you rot for eternity in torment. So saying, Obmi rode away to the north once again, mimicking the dead elf's maniacal cackling for a time as he went. End of chapter 28. Ouch! Poor guard, turning stone. Not very good. Now, let's see what's happening at the army of Yuz, of Ormus, and the uh, Leila and the other. Who, who attacked them? Chapter 29. A great battle raged in the valley called the Gathering Place by the minions of Yuz. Mordenkain and his captains had set a careful trap. Had the Lord Ormuz brought Obmi to the place immediately, the plan might just have succeeded, for the whole deployment and attack were well done. But Ormuz did not bring Obmi and the second key to his grand pavilion in the grassy clearing, and the company of unusually careful scouts in Mordenkainen's force discovered enemies lurking at the western end of the vale. Most of these gnolls had been slain on the spot, but a few managed to escape and raise the alarm. Mordenkainen had no choice but to close the jaws of his hidden array and hope that the prize lay within. Bands of wild elves and their sylvan kin were thrust along either side of the valley. Wood gnolls accompanied these elves, and all were hated foes of the humanoids. They would neither give nor ask quarter or use full troops. At the head of the valley were ranked the soldiers of the Archmage, trained units of men and demi-humans, well armed with bows and arbalest, polearms, and the full panoply of war. Scattered throughout these two companies were many minor spell-casters of both clerical and magical sort, while Mordenkainen stood with the Archmage Bigby, and the 7 other mages and wizards who, with Bigby, formed the magical circle of 8. When Ormuz's camp sounded the alarm, the army of Mordenkainen rolled forth to bring the enemy to battle. The two arms of the force held fast in the woods, while the main body of the army came marching across the white of the vale toward the humanoids. The flanking companies were growing stronger as the movement occurred, for as the central mass came closer to the foe, they freed flanking units that likewise moved eastward. The long inverted U-shape of Mordenkainen's array was slowly changing to resemble a small tipped C-shape, with the open portion along the secret roadway that ran from south to north within the eastern heart of the sprawling vast forest. All this occurred over a period of hours, of course, with much fighting and magical exchange taking place. Ormuz himself was a potent archmage, and with him was the high cleric called Patch, plus an assemblage of dozens of lesser magic users, clerics, shamans, and witch doctors, the latter two sort of spell workers being of humanoid sort exclusively. At the first onset of Mordenkainen's host, the servants of the vile cambion began casting their spells. They were met and answered by the advancing army of Kurds. Some terrible losses were initially incurred thus by both sides, but the lesser spellbinders were exhausted or slain, while the greater neutralized each other for a time. This brought elves and men into the melee with gnolls and ogres, the preponderance of archers and disciplined troops belonging to Mordenkainen, while Ormuz possessed the greater weight of soldiers and ravening creatures such as trolls of all sorts and chimeras unleashed as hounds by the evil leader of Yuz's horde. Minor demons and elementals struggled and fought, while men and demi-humans contested with humanoids and renegade humans. It seemed at first that the sheer numbers of full humanoids would prevail, supported as they were by nearly unkillable trolls, ogres, and the like. Whole rows of screaming swards and goblins, gnolls, and airy bugbears fell to storm of arrows and bolts, but they poured into the valley in the thousands and came on undaunted by the slaughter of their fellows. The stalemate between the spellcasting forces of the opposing armies was illusory, however. Mordenkainen alone was more than a match for the Archmage Ormuz, and together with Bigby he held the enemy in check. Thus, the 7 others of the circle were free to roam the field. With their power they broke down the trolls, slew the chimeras, and sent the great ogres down into death. Without such creatures to stiffen them, the swarming bands of humanoids and outlaw humans began to lose heart and retreat. In desperation, Ormuz sought the dwarf Obmi, desiring to hold and use the power of the second key, for that artifact would certainly have tipped the balance in favor of his forces once again. But neither Obmi nor the second portion of the artifact of all evil could be found. Then Ormuz called forth a great demon, one of the 666 who were the demilords of the Abyss. The thing that answered was not Balor himself, but one scarcely less powerful. The demon demanded a terrible price for service, and Ormuz agreed, for he had no other hope. The huge demon rose with a roar of awful laughter over the battlefield, and the men and demi-humans of Mordenkain, even those of the Circle, lost heart just as their foes rejoiced and regained courage to fight against at the sight of the terrible bat-winged monster. Mordenkainen himself, mounted on a great cloud dragon, went to meet the demon, and with him went the lords Erraj and Felnorit, whose steeds were griffons. At first the contest was even, but both of the armored fighting men who were sworn vassals of the Archmage bore weapons that caused the demon harm. Both of these brave men attacked fearlessly, and as the demon turned to combat their attacks, Mordenkainen sent his spells at the monster. The demon withstood most of the powers sent, the magic seeming to fall harmlessly away, but not all of these attacks were resisted. A great plane of force nearly tore the dark wing from the demon's right shoulder, while both Erraj and Docti Felnorit smote him with their swords. The fiend fused straight for the Archmage then, grappling with the dragon he rode to cause the rider to seize the painful due mercy sent upon his sealed hide. Both dragon and rider were prepared, and as the drake closed its great jaws upon the demon, Mordenkainen actually reached forth over the dragon's neck and laid his hands upon the demon, drawing its powers from it. The demon was already much weakened by its fighting, and the dragon was clutching it fast with its claws while it bit and tore with its teeth. When the Archmage released the demon's energy by its touch, the thing uttered a shrill scream that was audible over the whole battlefield. Heads turned upward at the sound, and the forces who fought for years saw their champion collapse into itself, imploding with a duel-sucking noise that was followed by a thunderclap as the air rushed in to fill the void where the huge demon had been. The concussion sent all three men and their riding creatures spinning downward, stunned and helpless. Despite this, the battle had turned in favor of Mordenkainen's army, and these troops advanced with a roar when the demon was slain. At that moment, both Ormuz and Patch sought to use their powers to escape the coming disaster, but Bigby had drawn near enough during the combat overhead to cast a disjunction of magical forces of the pavilion where the two servants of Zeus were. Unable to escape, both Ormuz and Patch sought to sell themselves as dearly as possible. In the end, both died, however, while Mordenkainen and his two vassals, Erraj and Falnorit, as well as the Cloud Dragon, managed to survive their falls. The victory was by no means complete. It was a hollow one, in fact. The circle did not close properly, and many of the humanoids and brigands managed to escape. Many of Mordenkainen's troops had been slain or wounded, just as the Archmage and his lords were hurt. 3 members of the magical band commanded by Bigby had met irrevocable death. Worst of all, the reason for the battle had proved fruitless. No second key was there for the taking. Lamenting his failure even as clerics healed his wounds, Mordenkainen, the Archmage, commander of the Obsidian Citadel, realized suddenly that beings of vaster power than his own had manipulated him, just as he had sought to manipulate others to gain the key. Looking ruefully at this joke, he wondered if perhaps there weren't strings moving in those who had moved him. The work of finding and hiding the wounded, burying the dead, and clearing the battlefield went on all the next day. Freed from his duties, the elven fighter mage Malf toured the area to observe at first hand the whole of what had been accomplished by the defeat of the horde of Zeus. There was much loot, but his lieutenants would see that his share was properly looted, for the elves who had fought under his command had performed heroically. In fact, Malf had personally slain several orcs and a troll as well, after having spent all of his magical power against the enemy. At the trampled place where paths meet, Malf discovered a stone statue of a man. Crushed beneath this toppled lid was a barely recognizable elf. It took only a moment to carefully remove the statue. Malf was incredibly strong, and he did the work alone. Then he emptied his canteen upon the stony form to wash away the stains somewhat. Finally, he searched the stiff corpse that had been Keak, the renegade elf mage, finding no clues as to Obmi's whereabouts, but keeping several items of possible use discovered in the process. That done, he rounded up a few soldiers to stand guard over the statue, telling them to remain on duty until he could return. "Be damned to hell!" Gord cried, jerking his dagger and sword free. Then he started and stared. No enemy stood before him. It was day, and he had just pulled his blade from nothing but hair. "Relax, Gord," a familiar voice said from behind. "All is well." He tried to turn with cat-like speed, ready for any new enemy, but instead Gord managed only a creaky and doggering step and nearly fell to the ground. His limbs felt like stone, and his head itched fearfully. Every time his heart beat there was a pounding in his ears and a throbbing pain in his brain. "What's wrong?" he said aloud to himself. Malf, at a distance, where any initial swing with sword or dagger will not harm him, spoke to Gord again. "Most truly, and do not attempt anything strenuous for the next few hours. You've just been returned from a stone statue to flesh and blood again, and your systems are in need of some time to restore themselves." "Then Keak managed to escape," Gord said softly. "Look there, beside the tree. You skewered that crazy bastard fairly before he managed to petrify you. That's of no import at this time, though. Tell me, what became of Keak's master, the dwarf Obmi?" Gord sat down on the hard-packed hearth and told Malf all that had occurred last night. These details filled in a picture that the elf was all too sorry to view. "The filthy little bugger has certainly gotten away again, and at least a field day's the start, too," fumed Malf. "Perhaps there's still a chance. I'll tell Lord Mordenkain of this, and he may be able to find Obmi and gain the second key yet." At that moment Gord was feeling awful, sick and dizzy, and too weary to care what became of the artifact. Malf started to leave, then stopped, peering into the sky to the north, where a huge black cloud had suddenly gathered. "Either that's a bad omen, or I am no mage," he exclaimed. "I mislike that, Gord. Look at the shape of that cloud. What does it resemble?" "I don't know," Gord replied, trying to focus his bleary eyes. "Maybe it's a giant toadstool, with a pointy lump atop it. The lump rather looks like an old crone in a tall hat, doesn't it?" There was no reply. Gord stopped his useless peering at the cloud, looking instead for Malf, but the fighter mage had gone. "Without a goodbye or giving me a chance to properly thank him," Gord mused. "He just vanishes. I am beginning to think that all elves are flighty, if not as mad as Keak was." He groaned and struggled erect unsteadily. Remembering the spear, he tottered amid the nearby trees, and a moment later reappeared on the pathway. He walked unsteadily with the help of the spear, and his clothing was dirty, but nonetheless Gord was making his way southward in the direction his comrade awaited. Behind him, unnoticed, the black cloud grew denser still, settled to the ground, and then wafted away as quickly as it had gathered. End of chapter 29. We are close to the end, eh? There is 34 chapters at all, so we are only 4 chapters left, and we read the next one in a moment. A brief pause for my lungs. I think I deserve it. So next time we hand this book. Uh, it's pretty strange when I do live things, live readings. A lot of people searching me, and when I did nothing, a lot of people search nothing. Okay, good. Okay, shall we continue? Oh, sorry. Wait a second now, where I represent my... Okay, let's continue with chapter 30. The beginning of the end. No, I kid, I'm kidding. I don't really know. I don't know this book. Something dampens. Sorry. Something dampens our powers, Lord of Evil. The mage Vane explained nervously as Hughes strode into the scrying chamber atop one of the greater towers in his dreadful palace. If the others were here, I am certain we could get through, but with nothing but petty little weaklings to assist me, I can do nothing, the magic user whined in his fearful nasal voice. Stop that! The cambion said without looking at the anxious man who scuttled a pace behind him. Yus was in his massive demoniac form, and his long legs propelled the corpulent mass of his red-skinned body along at a pace that Vane found difficult and undignified to keep up with. The cambion liked that, for the whining spellbinder had to come flapping after him, or else risk his displeasure. Yus stopped before a massive vessel of beaten copper and brass. The inky stuff within it was dead black. The surface should have reflected an iridescent sheen strange. You see, Lord— Silence! Yus bellowed, and Vane nearly collapsed in fear at the command. Why is it so dark in here? The cambion demanded. It had suddenly grown particularly gloomy in the chamber, and the shaking magic user hastened to a nearby window to find the cause. There is a great mass of clouds overhead, Lord Hughes, as black as I have ever seen. Perhaps some enemies send wither magic against us. His master wasn't paying the slightest bit of attention to his words, so Vane allowed his sentence to trail off. Hughes was still at the great scrying basin, peering into the thing fixedly. Little man, I feel that some event of great import is about to occur. It is of favorable sort, I'm certain. Begone when I cease my speech, and I am enough talking. This statement was punctuated by the slam of the chamber door. Yus smiled an eerie, evil smile, and then he concentrated on the liquid. Instead of growing lighter, the absolute blackness of the surface increased, as if the stuff was absorbing what little illumination fell on it. The cambion bent closer, then leaped back with undignified haste. The oily liquid in the massive pool erupted in a geyser that struck the ceiling almost 20 feet above its surface. As the droplets pattered down throughout the room, a pair of women appeared. Before his startled gaze stood Igwilv, his mother, and Zuktmoy, demoness lady of Fuji. Between them, grasped by both, was Dai's second key. For one who calls himself the Eldritch Lord of Evil, you look rather startled. Thunderstruck is the word. Weren't you expecting us? Igwilv said, and as she asked the question, she smirked at the figure beside her. Curious, Igwilv, Tasha, appear in the book now then his core books are in the stores. Okay. What coincidence. Zaktmoy, the demon, smirked back at the crone, who was possibly the oldest and most powerful human ever known. Then smiled broadly at the cambion. Yes, my love, it has been too long. Recovering a lost dignity, Yus drew himself up to his full height and spoke with firm tones. Both of you, assume a more pleasing form immediately. But first, you may hand me that which you have brought. Igwil shook her head. Not so fast, my prodigal. Is that any way for a devoted son to speak to his dear mother? Even as she uttered this admonition, the ancient crone, one who had appeared a parody of every child's nightmare of a wicked witch, changed. Her features flowed and changed as her body grew and strengthened. Scraggly grey locks became flowing tresses of hair like spun gold, and face and form matched the radiance of this golden head. You brought me forth by accident, and you have been more a mother in the breach than the office Ig will. Cease your foolery and deliver my prize to me. The cambion added with what could have been petulance. Zuctmoy too had altered from a horrid harridan to a breathtaking beauty. As voluptuous as her companion, Zuctmoy's assumed form was as dark as Igvil's was golden. As this occurred, the demoness swayed across the intervening distance between them and threw her arms around the youth. Greet your lover properly, she demanded in sultry fashion, and you too, Wilva, come and join us too. Stop this foolishness, the cambion said, trying to disengage Zuctmoy's arms with one hand and fend off the giggling evil with the other. Yes, dared not offend the one and wished for nothing more than the artifact held by the other. This was not in keeping with his dignity nor power. I demand you stop this now. Demand? Said Zuctmoy. Demand? Echoed Igwil. The hard edge of both voices made the cambion hastily rephrase his statement. My dearest love, my own mother, you have confused and befuddled me with your coming, with that which you bring me, and most of all with this fond greeting. With that, he clasped the dark form that was Zuctmoy and embraced her lasciviously. As she looked, he scooped the transformed Igvil into the expanse of his other arm and kissed her too. There, my most lovely ladies, I make amends. Releasing them, Yuz proceeded to kiss each of their hands in a courtly fashion, greeting each by full title and welcoming them to his abode. Igwil smiled, and there was a suggestion of mockery and sly understanding in the expression. Yes, my son, you excelled yourself in your choice of consorts. Lady Zuctmoy is absolutely without peer. Thank you, dear Igwil, the transforming demoness said prettily. I am in your debt, and you will never regret aiding me. Tch, not mention it. Time for settling that will come. You and I have much to accomplish now, she added, giving the Queen of Fuji a meaningful glance. What? Youth began. Of course, the woman who had given him birth said. You are wanting information. Well, then, attend me. It was a near thing, for those soft and stupid ones who opposed the true order of things came in their multitudes. Despite their mulings attempts, I found and freed dear Lady Zuctmoy. Together we went to her lovely estate in the abyss, where she renewed herself. What wonderful chats we shared, and what plans we schemed, Lady Zuctmoy and I. Then, as time was of the utmost, we returned to this mundane plane to set matters on the correct course here. The second key, from where did you get it? Hughes interrupted. This? Igwil feigned a negligent disdain, for the oddly twisted shape of dual metal and lustreless crystals of dusky hue she still held. It radiated a dim aura which was discernible to us when we melded our powers and considered it, Igwil told the cambion. So we changed ourselves and went unnoticed to where it was. It was a simple matter to take it and bring it here. Once possessed, its power is such that only a major combination could prevent we two from doing as we wished. Did the dwarf called Obmi bear it? That one was aiding directly for a large group of puissant elves, the snot-nosed servants of that upstart, Mordenkain. How that silly trickster howled when we took the prize before his own dogs could snap it up. And the dwarf? Igwil smiled and gestured to Zuctmoy. The demoness reached into the low bodice of your groan and withdrew a large, exceptionally ugly toad. This is the very same dwarf you spoke of, Obmi. No matter, toads are such dear little things that I had to have him. They love to sit on my fungi, you know. The demoness concluded as she tapped the covering batrachian on its worthy head. No, I don't know. I'm pretty low on volume. I don't think so. So be it, you say with a shrug. He failed, or nearly so, if you wish him as a pet. He is yours until you're tired of him. The Queen of Fuji looked a delightful little log, and repressed the toad within her bosom. You are so thoughtful, dear Yuz. It is nothing. The cambion said with forced generosity. Igwilv interrupted them. Come, come, my dears, let us get to the matters of import. My little youth has a kingdom to expand. There are plans to make. But first, there must be a triumphal procession and festival here in Doraha. The populace must know of our coming, of the new power of the land, and of its new status as arbiter of all. Yus groaned inwardly, cursing Igwilv carefully in a corner of his mind that was well shielded from any possible prying by magic. Now the cambion talked, I understand why Grast imprisoned her in a dismal plain within the abyss. Igwilv, it was certain, will not settle for a role of silent helper in matter of state, or any other matters. In tandem with Zutmoy, and the two seem to have become virtual sisters, they will never allow him his prerogatives, nor a moment's peace. Pay attention, Yus, Igwilv said with a scolding tone that didn't fit her charming beauty at all. You were always a daydreaming a little do-nothing as a youngling, but that won't be the case anymore. Yes, Yus, do attend our words, added Zutmoy. If we are to rule a fitting state here on this silly little world, you must be able to do your part, so pay attention. Igwilv took the opportunity to berate him for his poor choices in selecting members for the 3 groups of 6 who served him. It is just as well that Ormuz and the one cold patch choose to die in battle. Had they dared return, their deaths would have been longer and less handsome. Know you that the one dealt with lackeys of Nerul, whilst the other sought to make a pact with your father? Yus shook his head, for he could not speak. And those miserable little nothings who sought to terrorize the northern stretch of the Vespe, all they managed to do was stir up an organized force, which slew them and their horde. Now all the forest is lost to us, for between the woods folk, Mordenkain, and the dirty elves there, it will be unsafe to venture amidst the forest for some time. But Ruduj and Bee were dead too. The impact struck Yus like a cold slap. He gritted his needle-sharp teeth and asked pleasantly, What will you do? Teach that minion of yours, Halga, her proper place first, Zuktomoy said with a grating voice. Then we will assist you in the selection of replacements, Igwilv added. And so end chapter 30 of Artifact of Evil. Pretty short chapters at the end. Well, remain 26, not so much pages anyway, remains. 27 pages, so I suppose the last chapters are very short. Anyway, for today is really all. Now, I think we end this Artifact of Evil next time with 3 chapters remaining, so I think we can end it. And after that, we continue our reading, but with such book. There is a lot of I have to decide myself because I explain. Sorry, I'm mumbling nonsense. Because there is a thing of strangeness in the Greyhawk series. Because it's not easy decided where to continue. After Artifact of Evil, the Greyhawk Adventure series follow with a series of books of Rose Stace. And the Gord Rose series follow with other books by Gygax. I think I read them first because I want to know the end of the story, and I think this is the right choice. But at the end of the book of Gygax, Greyhawk was destroyed, so I don't really know. I have to decide anyway. But for today is all. I wish you a good Sunday or any other day you are living now, and a good day from the Stoned Bard Ivan Lacroix is all. Till the next time. See ya!